What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. I got a fun video today that was inspired by a question in my comment boxes. Guys, if you aren't subscribed to the channel yet, please take some time to do so. But let's get into this, guys. I received a really cool comment on one of my past videos, and I love reading your guys' comments and seeing questions that help me come back and make more videos and just produce more content for you guys. And I love being able to answer your guys' questions. That question was, at what point do you decide to send your vintage comics off to get slabbed? I believe it was a Brooklyn born 718 or something like that, the username. So to whoever asked that question, thank you so much for this question. Really amazing question. Now, I've talked about picking and choosing books to send off to get graded in the past. We're going to do this a little differently in this video and speak directly to the question asked. So I really like this question because, I mean, it's something that probably we all have to ask if we are thinking about getting our books graded, sending them off to CGC, CBCS, PGX, EGS, wherever it is we send them to, right? What the individual asked, though, was vintage books specifically. So I want to look at that specifically, okay? At what point do you send your vintage books off to get slabbed? So first off, we have to look at what vintage means. Vintage could mean 90s books at this point. Guys, we're in 2020. 1990 was 30 years ago. I know it's crazy to think about that. So you got to really look at, well, what are you considering vintage, right? So we got to go back and break down the ages of comic books. Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, Copper. And from there, we get more of a fleshed out point of what it is we're looking at. Now, one thing to keep in mind when sending books out is how companies like CGC or CBCS look at the grading tiers, okay? So for me, when I send books out, I absolutely look at tiers for multiple reasons, and I'll get into each of those. But when you think about vintage, you have to understand that CGC and CBCS, but we're going to use CGC specifically here. They look at anything pre-1975 as one tier, and anything 1975 post as another tier, as the modern tier. And those two different tiers are going to be looked at as different orders. There's different price points for them, and they're going to be separated into separate orders, which are going to incur more costs. And I'll explain that in a minute. Now, another thing that you have to understand with different tiers is value of the book. So when you look at a vintage book, you could be looking at a Silver Age 12-cent book that's worth maybe $50. And then you could be looking at a Silver Age 12-cent book that could be a $2,000 book. And the value of those books matter towards what tier companies like CGC or CBCS are going to put them in. So you got to consider all these things when sending a book out. Let me give you guys a couple examples. So let's see. Well, you know what? I have one graded book here that I'm going to use an example, and that's my Fantastic Four 48, okay? And then we're going to find another Silver Age book in my box here, a raw book. We're just going to pull a random one out just to use, okay? And it's this one right here, which is the first cameo, Fantastic Four 66, first cameo of the Him Cocoon, right? So now these would be in the same tier based on age, but because the value of this book is more than this one, they're going to actually be separated into two different tiers. This book is valued well over $400, okay? This book is probably, in the condition that it's in, is probably about, still only about like a $30, $35 book. So they're going to be in different tiers, okay? Now, of course, we talked about age as well. So if you have a, let's pull out, if I have this Captain America 30 center, first appearance of Marvel Boy, later becomes Quasar. If I send both of these books, so this book it isn't worth hundreds of dollars yet, but these are going to be in separate tiers because this is post 1975. Okay. And actually, is it? Yep, 77, 30 cent. And this is pre 1975. So these are going to be separate tiers no matter of the value. Okay. And the reason why we have to look at tiers, guys, is because it's going to incur more costs. So when you ask me personally, because other people do things for their own reasons, me, I'm about looking at how much money I'm putting out for my books. I'm on a budget. I'm not a huge slabber where I just go and slab everything. If I'm spending money on getting books slabbed and graded, I want to make sure I'm minimizing costs. So, the tiers for value and age. If you have separate tiers, say you send out 10 or 15 books, okay? If you have all of your books post 1975, right? But some of them are more valuable than the others. They could be separated into different tiers, which are going to incur separate shipping charges. And those shipping charges are not cheap whatsoever. Same goes for pre-1975 and post-1975 books. No matter the value, they're going to be separated into different tiers. All right, so for me, this is one thing. If I had to answer the question, how do you decide which vintage books to send off to get slabbed? First off, I most likely will not send two different tiers off to get graded. And let me explain why. In my years of sending books off to grade, which has only been a couple of years now, okay, I've kept them in the same tier, and I've had to pick and choose which tier I wanted because I don't want to incur more fees, especially shipping fees. I don't. It's not worth it to me. So I pay for the CGC yearly membership, which you could take, what is it, $130, right? Something like that. So you pay that membership, but that membership, those fees become a credit. So you could send in a certain amount of books and you have $130-something credit, right? Now, I've gone over that each year by a little bit, okay? So what I've done is I've decided which books do I have that I value more to send off. So the first time around, I sent out pre-1975 books. I sent out some Silver Age books. This last year, I sent out modern, 1975 and up. And they were all books that were under the $400 value. And they were all in the same tier. It saved me a lot on shipping. So it's almost the end of the year. I'm looking at having another batch that's going to be shipped out next year, right? So here's the thing. I have a lot of books that are Silver Age books that I want to send out. For example, I have a lot of Thor books, like first appearance of High Evolutionary, right? I have some of the Galactus origin books that I wouldn't mind sending out. I have a lot of Silver Age Spider-Man books that I would want to send out, like the second appearance of Green Goblin, possibly third appearance of Green Goblin. I have the 39, the first Ramita cover, and so forth, right? But I also have, let me show you guys, I also have, this is a big one that I want to send out, my Fantastic Four 49. But this one would be in a different tier than almost every other one that I just showed, because of how valuable this one is. So that makes me not want to send this in. For me at this point, it's not worth it to incur $20 to $30 to $40 more in shipping and pay more. I forgot about mentioning that. The higher value tiers, you pay more per each book. I'm not sending this in. It's not worth it to me at this point. Look, some people may take the approach and say, if I have to spend more money on tiers, I'm going with the higher tiers. I'm going with the big money books. That's fine. But you know what else that does? More insurance. I want everything that I send out to be insured to the dollar. All right? So you're paying more money at the UPS or however you're shipping it on more insurance because you want it to cover the value of the books. I'm not shipping anything in the mail without having full insurance, right? So these are another things that turn me off from sending in big books. So right now, because I'm on a budget, because I don't want to spend extra on multiple tiers, I am not sending in big books. So again, you look at, some people may look at that and be like, you're tripping. The big books are where it's at. Not necessarily. To me, the big books are big books, and I'm happy to have them raw or graded, and it doesn't really matter. Okay. Now let's go into another answer, a separate answer to how you decide on which vintage books to send off. All right. And I've talked about this before, but it's all about the grade. It's all about the grade and why you're sending your books off in the first place. Grade matters for most of us that are sending the books off, but it matters in different aspects if you're sending them off because you want to flip, if you're sending them off because you want the best value, and so forth, right? So you have to understand the grade that you're hoping to get before you send the books out. And again, I reference anybody who cares about the grades of your books and you want to make sure that you're sending in books that come back with a solid grade, you know, nothing below of what you are expecting that book to be, or that grade to be. The Overstreet Guide to Grading Comics. I highly recommend investing a few dollars in getting one of these books. It'll help you with your grading skills, and you can look at all your raw books before you send them in to a grading company to say, well, you know, I looked over this and I don't think it's going to get a high enough grade that I want, so I'm not going to spend the money to go get it slabbed. All right? But you look at something like this. I sent this in. It's a 9.2 Origin Captain America. This book, because it was so high grade, I bought this book for like, I don't know, maybe 50 bucks some years back. And I think right now in a 9.2 graded, this book is, I do believe off the top of my head, it's over a $200 book. So I knew, like, I gave it a press. I knew that this book was clean. I knew that it was going to come back a high grade. So that's why I sent it in. Beautiful book. So if this was like maybe a mid-grade book, like a 4.5 or a 5.0, I might not have sent it in. I probably wouldn't have sent it in. And it's not because I'm selling it, but that's just because I do care about higher grades for some of my books. But for a book like this, I would be more lenient if I was to send in an Amazing Spider-Man 129. That's whether it was for my personal collection or I was thinking about flipping it. Now, I bought this already graded, but if I was to send this book in, I would be okay with getting a low grade, right? As long as I remember what I just said about me not sending in the high value books, because I'm on a budget. So as long as I was willing to have the budget and spend the money on the high tier books, I wouldn't mind it coming back a lower grade, because the book is still valuable to me in a lower grade. You're still going to add value to your fair market value by getting it graded even at a lower grade. Same goes for, you know, in Fantastic Four 48. Again, I got 2 of my Holy Keys in 3.0s because, and again, I bought them already graded, but, you know, I don't mind these being in a lower grade. If I was willing to spend the money to send them out, I wouldn't mind doing it knowing that they were lower grade books. All right. But if you're really set on a high grade, especially if you're looking to sell, especially if it's specifically coming from an investment purpose, guys, you really have to be aware of what grade you're expecting. And this is one book where I failed at that. Now, I will say I think CGC was a little harsh on this. I still believe this book should be at least a 7.0. And that's another thing you guys have to understand. See, look, and I'm not going to go get into bashing CGC or the conspiracy theories, but quality control at CGC doesn't always add up. And sometimes their gauging of grades is a bit questionable, but I do understand why this got hit lower than what I expected, although I do believe it should be a little higher. But let's put that aside, guys. Here's my point. This is my point. If I bought this book for like 20 bucks. Okay, Spider-Woman #1. I bought this book for 20 bucks. The seller on eBay said it was very fine and near mint, probably around a 9.0. I looked at the pictures and I agreed. I said, oh yeah, this looks clean. Before I sent this book out, I still, and maybe I was a little bit jaded by, you know, having it in the back of my head. And don't get me wrong, I am not one to be jaded by eBay sellers stating a grade, because for the most part, most of them call books much higher grades than they are. And it's laughable sometimes. But I looked this book over and I said, hey, I believe this book is probably like an 8.5, 9.0. I mean, it's clean. It is clean. The black's decently clean. It's got a couple of little nicks down here and down here. A little bit of nicking right there. But overall, and I thought that there was just one little kind of a color break right here. But I guess this ended up being a rip in that, which like a not even a millimeter of a rip. It's calling it a rip still to me is kind of crazy. Anyways, I didn't gauge this book. I lost money out on this book. For what I paid for the book and for what it cost me to get the book graded, I lost money out if I wanted to sell it. I would not be able to make my money back. So again, to answer the question, and this is technically a vintage book, even though it's in the modern tier as a 35-cent Bronze Age book. So again, you got to understand a very solid range of what you think the grade's going to be. You have to gauge it and judge it appropriately. And if you're in it for, you know, the investment or flipping, you have to understand the risk that you're willing to take. Okay? And that's why it's always good for anybody that's sending books out to get graded and slab to be decently savvy of being able to gauge a grade on a book, because you don't want a book that you thought was going to be a 8.5, 9.0 coming back a 6.0 at all. So that was my one mistake, guys. And again, I'm going to show you guys another example. If you guys are sending books out to get graded just to build value or to try to flip them, I'm going to show you this book right here. Black Panther #3 in a 6.5. This book I bought graded. I paid like $22 for this book. And I think that was including shipping. All right. If not, shipping was only a couple dollars. Whoever pressed this book lost money, because you could get a 6.5 of this book. It's probably going to go for anywhere from $10 to $15, even in a 6.5. All right. This seller paid, most likely, if they have a membership fee, they're going to pay $18 plus shipping and fees and all that. So you estimate that the shipping fees, or excuse me, the total slabbing fees and cost whoever slabbed this book about $30. That means they bought the book, whether they paid $1 for the book or $5 for the book, whatever. They already paid about $30 just to get this thing slabbed, and they sold it for less than that. So again, you have to, first off, you have to look at the book. Is this book worth grading? This is, I mean, hey, look, it's a cool Bronze Age Black Panther book, but it's not a key. It's not one that's very valuable. Now, maybe if it was a 9.6 or a 9.8, you can really get a return on your investment. But did this person think that they were going to send it in to get graded and they were going to get like a 9.6 or a 9.8? I don't know. I'm not that person. But if they did, and it came back a 6.5, then they weren't savvy enough on judging the grade of that book. Or they didn't care about the grade and they just thought, hey, well, look, it's a Bronze Age book. It's a vintage book. I'm just going to go slab it because that means automatically it's going to make me money. And that's not the case. And I've talked about that before, guys, in other videos. So you got to keep that in mind as well. So there's my breakdown, guys. And for those that haven't watched my other video, go through my videos and try to look for it. I posted it only like maybe a couple or a few months ago. So it's not far back, where I talk about, you know, what books to choose when sending to CGC, because I kind of talk about it in a more, much more detailed aspect. But I think the way that I approached this today really answered that individual's question. So if they're watching, again, I appreciate the question. Let me know if I answered it to your, you know, liking. And I appreciate each and every one of you for watching. Let me know what you guys think below. Why do you guys send books out to get slabbed and graded? Or maybe you don't send books out at all. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you check out all the awesome links below. Official Journos Comics merch, how to become a patron via patreon.com for only $3.99 a month. Affiliates of the channel, A1 Comics, our comic book canon show. Check out the links. Sub everyone up. And until next time, guys.